Hello, Dr. Jenna here from Heart-Based Medicine. I wanted to talk today about the thyroid. This is actually going to be part of a series because it's too much to put into just one video. I work with a lot of patients with thyroid illness, and in fact, about 12% of the population will have thyroid illness in their lifetime. Women more than men, and I actually think that rate is going up. I think that number is a bit low. I talk to patients all the time about thyroid, and I want to just put some of that basic knowledge into a video so patients can look at that video, get that information that I've talked to them about, and review it for themselves. So the thyroid gland sits right here in your neck. It's H-shaped, it has two lobes and an isthmus, so it sits right here as an H. The thyroid gland is one of your endocrine glands, and the endocrine glands all work in harmony with each other, and we'll talk about that more probably in the third video, so stay tuned for that one. So the thyroid gland is really important in our metabolism, and if your thyroid gland is low, your metabolism can be running low. If your thyroid gland is high, your metabolism is running high. So what does the thyroid do and how does it do it? So first off, the thyroid gland is regulated by the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland sits up in here in the sella turcica. It makes many hormones, but it makes, in this case, something called TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. That hormone then goes down to the thyroid and tells it how much thyroid to produce. When that TSH hits the thyroid, it tells it to produce its thyroid hormones. Now, the thyroid hormones start as thyroglobulin. That's mostly made up of tyrosine. Then the tyrosine interacts with iodine and becomes thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. Now, is there a T1 and 2? Nobody talks about it, but you assume if there's a 3 and 4, there might be a 1 and 2, so we'll see. The thyroid gland also makes something called calcitonin, which regulates calcium metabolism and is not thought to be one of the thyroid hormones, but is important to know if you ever have your thyroid removed. So the thyroid gland uses the tyrosine, combines it with the iodine, and makes thyroid hormones. Now, we have T3 and T4 that's produced from the thyroid gland. Now, I look at it as T3 is really the most active hormone. That's like money in your pocket or your purse. That's the energy you have to spend right now, what you can use just like that money you have. And again, we are moving into the cashless society, so we want to have that money in our purse or our pocket. T4, which is what the thyroid produces mostly, it's about 80% T4 and 20% T3, can vary. That T4 is more like your money in the bank. It has to be converted to T3 to be useful, and there's many cofactors that help that conversion. We'll talk about that in a minute. So you have the T3 and the T4. You want them both because the T3 is more short-acting. You want to have some reserve there that you can get if you're in a time of stress. You need some extra energy, so you want to have that T4 there that you can convert into T3 to use. Now, those go out and work on the body as a whole. Then they're fed back up to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland then decides, do I have too much or too little of T3, T4, and then raises or lowers that TSH to stimulate the thyroid gland more. Now, the cofactors that help T4 to become T3, so it's what you put your cash card in, but you need some codes to make that cash card work. So those things that you need in your code, you need vitamin D from the sunshine, you need B12, you need iron, you need selenium, which many of our soils are poor in, and you need zinc. Again, many of our soils are poor in zinc, so we don't always have those cofactors that convert our T4 to T3, which is what we need to have that energy levels. So when I look at thyroid, I also always look at the cofactors, and I look at the iodine levels as well, because many of us are also low in iodine. Our soils are depleted in it. We do add iodine to salt to try and raise it, but there's many things that block our iodine uptake, and we just don't consume enough of it. So when you have thyroid disease or the thyroid's not working correctly, there's a number of different thyroid disorders that you can have. Basically, you can put them into hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. Hyperthyroidism means the thyroid's running too fast. If you have hyperthyroidism, you may be feeling anxious, you may be jittery, losing weight, lose hair, lose some of your eyebrows, diarrhea, those types of things, feel hot and sweaty. If you have hypothyroidism, meaning your thyroid's too low, you'd be gaining weight, feeling slow and sluggish, sleeping a lot. Again, also hair loss, loss of the latter third of your eyebrows. You'd also see constipation. You'd see dry skin. And with both thyroids, you can see change in your menstrual cycles for the women because, of course, the endocrine system interacts with each other a lot. Now, there's different types of those two categories. So with hyperthyroidism, there can be just hyperthyroidism, but there also can be autoimmune hyperthyroidism, which is called Graves' disease. We'll talk a little bit more about autoimmune type things in the second video. With the hyperthyroidism, the too low, again, you can have just straightforward hypothyroidism. Your thyroid just stops working well. Or you can have autoimmune hyperthyroidism, which is called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Now, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the leading autoimmune disease in the world. So it tells you how this is getting quite prevalent. I would say more than at 12%. You can also end up having hypothyroidism if you sometimes treatment for Graves is to treat it with radioactive iodine or have part of your thyroid removed. And then of course your thyroid's going to go low because you don't have enough of a gland there to use. The other thing that can occur is thyroid cancer. Now that is also on the rise, and that shows up as a nodule in the thyroid. A lot of times thyroid cancer is treated by taking either part or all of your thyroid out, and then you can have what's called secondary hypothyroidism. Thyroid can also be affected by radiation. If you've had radiation treatment for cancers, if you see radiologists and dentists and things wearing a thyroid guard because too much radiation can of course affect your thyroid quite a lot. So the thyroid is so important. It kind of regulates our metabolism. It's kind of that master gland, though really the pituitary is the master gland, but it affects the thyroid, which then affects all of our metabolism. When you have hyperthyroidism, the main way that is treated is initially with medication. Sometimes, if you catch it early enough, you can work with herbs. And again, if it doesn't respond to medication, I do find with hyperthyroidism, the quicker you treat it, the better. You seem to be able to resolve it quicker. If it doesn't respond to medication, then sometimes you go on to have either that radioactive iodine treatment, which basically kills the thyroid gland, or partial or full thyroidectomy. Now remember I said that the thyroid gland makes that calcitonin, which if you have your thyroid removed, you don't have that anymore. So it is very important to remember that and look at your bone density, things like that. If the thyroid's too low or hypothyroidism, again, standard treatment is to replace it with medication. Now, in early stages, sometimes herbs can be helpful in supporting those cofactors we talked about, remember? And also iodine. Iodine can be very, very useful in thyroid illnesses. When you treat it standard medication, the standard pharmaceutical medication is T4. So your levothyroxine, your L-troxin, all those medications are T4. Now for the majority of the population, T4 works great because you just convert it to T3 when you need it, you withdraw that money out of your bank, how most people live their life. They don't carry cash in their wallets or their purse, and you just withdraw it when you need it. However, some people, some category of the population, don't do that so well, or they don't feel well without some T3 on board. With those people, what I use is more of what's called natural thyroid or desiccated thyroid or porcine thyroid. And that's actually made from pig's thyroid, and it's ground up, and you have both T3 and T4 in it, as well as that thyroglobulin, as well as that the calcium regulator that you need. So some people do better with that. Usually the patients that I get are ones that didn't do well on thyroxine. They arrive in my office and we work with something else. There are other things you can do. You can also take a short-acting T3. You can take a long-acting T3. You can take T3 and T4 in different combinations. Usually the natural thyroid is a 1-to-4 combination, but you can do any type of combination you want. But for most people, thyroxine works well as long as you have your cofactors in place and you are converting it well. Now, there is something that does occur. Your body always likes balance. The body loves balance. So what happens if you have that T4 floating around? It converts it either to the free T3, which is basically available. It goes into your wallet or your purse, or it converts into something called reverse T3, which is, I call it the tax department. So it goes straight out of your bank account into that reverse T3 and you can't really use it well. Some people who have trouble with using just pure T4, it's because they're converting a lot of their hormone into the reverse T3. And even though their TSH and their T4 looks great, their T3 is low because it's going into that reverse T3. Now you can check reverse T3. In Australia, it's not a covered test. You have to pay for it. It's around $100 to have it done. It takes a while to come back. But if you do get your T3, your reverse T3 checked, make sure you always have your T3 checked at the same time, because you have to look at the ratio. It's not just one to the other, because remember, it's a balance. So when we're treating thyroid, you have to look at that whole person, look at their cofactors. Are they low in any of those cofactors, which again, a lot of women are, and women have more thyroid disease than men. Do they have any other underlying issues that are creating problems? Are they getting enough iodine? Are they getting enough tyrosine in their diet to even make the thyroglobulin? And then how do the ratios look? How is their T4? How is their TSH? And do they have any thyroid antibodies? Do they have Hashimoto's disease? Which you would treat basically the same way, but then you would go into treating Hashimoto's. And like I said, I'll talk about that in a second video. So thyroid disease, I see it all the time. It seems to be pretty ubiquitous. And like I said, we seem to be getting more and more of it, and more of that Hashimoto's. And again, I'll go into the reasons for that in the second video, but modern society is one of the big reasons for that. All the endocrine disruptors in our environment, all the plastics in our environment, and our constant stress. So stay with me. I'll come back with a second video on Hashimoto's, and I hope you enjoyed the video today.